Hey guys, well, the United States Department of Justice is saying that Google will need to sell off the Chrome web browser. Now, everybody knows Google Chrome. Google Chrome is basically the biggest web browser, and it's not even just the biggest web browser, it's also like one of the biggest web browser frameworks. Google Chrome is based off of an open source project that Google funds called Chromium. Chromium is used in a bunch of other web browsers, such as Opera, Opera GX, Microsoft Edge. It's used in a lot of different places. Not only that, but it's also used in certain applications such as Discord or Visual Studio Code, certain applications like I think even Slack uses it. Like a lot of different applications and web browsers use Chromium or Chrome in one way or another. It is a very impactful piece of software that Google has made. Now, the Department of Justice is saying that Google will need to sell it off. This comes as there's been a big antitrust case that's been going on against Google since like 2023. The Department of Justice isn't too happy at Google. We'll be getting into that in today's video, so let's dive right into it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at this article by ARS Technica. Google must sell Chrome. Android could also be next, in a certain way. We'll dive into that in a little bit. But first, let's go ahead and see what's going on. So Google has now gotten its first taste of remedies that the Donald Trump-backed Department of Justice plans to pursue to break up the tech giant's monopoly in search. Now, this antitrust case started in 2023 by the Biden administration, and the antitrust case specifically targets Google's monopoly in the search engine market. Now, Google has a really big monopoly in the search engine market, including in the search engine ads market. So they're basically saying, hey, Google, you're too big. Stop. And one of the ways that they see to break up the company is by having Google sell off the Google Chrome browser. Now, this is one of a few different remedies that they are proposing. One thing that they were thinking about is having Google sell off their AI investments. That has been canned. Google will be able to keep their AI investments. However, they still want to change how Android is handled, which is the phone operating system that Google makes and runs and has an app store for, and they want to have Google sell off the Chrome browser. So the DOJ is asking the court that's handling this case to force Google to promptly and fully divest itself of Google Chrome, along with any data or other assets required for its continued operation. Now, it's effectively aiming to take the Google Chrome user base, consisting of some 3.4 billion people, away from Google and hand it off to any competitor. The government will vet any potential buyers to ensure the sale does not pose a national security threat. During the term of the judgment, Google will not be allowed to release any new browsers. However, it may continue to contribute to the open source Chromium project, which, as you may or may not know, is what Google Chrome is backed on. And effectively, Google Chrome is I guess you could call it a stable Google branded version of the Chromium web browser, which is fully open source. There's no strict copyright attached to it. It is, within a certain effect, public domain. I say certain because open source licenses are a whole separate subject, but the easiest way I can describe it is it's in the public domain. It's not owned by any particular entity. Anybody can download it. Anybody can use it. It's free. You can see the code behind it. You can do whatever you wish with it. Now, Google does back the Chromium project. Google does offer resources, compute, developers, time, and money to the Chromium project. So removing Chrome away from Google would, in one way or another, affect the open source Chromium project in pretty significant ways, because admittedly, that would probably remove them, or at least make it a little more difficult for them to have certain types of resources. And even then, the Chromium project would definitely take a little bit of a different turn, because the Chromium project is more meant to be like an upstream, like an upstream of what Google Chrome will eventually become. It's like the very first, it's like the alpha branch, and then it goes down into Google Chrome, which is the stable product that's given to consumers. So I feel like the Chromium project itself might end up taking a slightly different direction if it is sold to another company, because then that other company will bring on its own developers to the Chromium project, and it would cause a pretty significant change in direction for the overall project. Which then again, remember, Chrome isn't the only thing that's based on Chromium. There's Microsoft Edge, there's the Brave web browser, there's Opera GX, there's different applications like Visual Studio Code from Microsoft, there's Discord, and there's a million other things that are based on Chrome in one way or another. So again, it will definitely see a very significant turn in direction overall, and in one way or another might affect certain things, namely other applications, directly or indirectly. So we're going to go ahead and continue reading through. This filing includes some changes from the initial remedy filings of 2024, but more changes could be coming. So again, this is what the DOJ is seeking to have done as of right now, but obviously more things could be changed. So all in all, Google obviously said, we don't like this. We think it would harm consumers. We don't want our browser taken away. I mean, what else are they going to say? They're not going to, with open arms, say, hey, here's the browser. No, it's like one of their most popular products. And they even have like Chrome OS and Chromebooks and things like that. Like, it's literally one of their biggest things. Like, there's also like Chromebook computers that run Google Chrome and Google Chrome only. It is like one of the biggest selling things to any like educational institution, K through 12. Like, Google has such a big market here, and they're going to have to sell it off. I can see why they're upset. I don't blame them. I would probably be upset too. They aren't happy. Now, the government has changed its position on whether or not Google needs to have to get rid of their AI investment, and the DOJ basically says, no, you don't need to divest from AI firms. You will have to notify the government before making new AI investments, but you don't have to divest in any of your investments in other AI companies, which they have made some pretty significant investments into different AI firms, namely Anthropic and Character AI. So they have a pretty big stake in other AI companies besides, Google themselves. And the government's not saying that they need to divest from that. They can keep those investments. However, Android is it's kind of interesting. So, the government previously offered Google the option to sell Android in lieu of making any changes to how the platform operates. However, the divestment option is no longer on the table. Not that Google was going to do it anyways. There was no way they were going to sell Android. That's not happening. Now, the DOJ wants the court to impose a variety of different restrictions on how Google can promote its products on Android. The government proposes that Google should be prohibited from making any of its search or generative AI products mandatory on Android. For example, by limiting access to AI Core or different APIs in Android, forcing like Google's products to be used. So basically they're saying, hey, you can't limit Android and enforce your own products. That's no bueno. You need to not impose those kinds of restrictions. Similarly, Google would be prevented from pressuring its partners to use Google Search or AI services over the competition. If none of this is effective at breaking up Google's monopoly, or if Google attempts to ignore the remedies, the government could force Google to sell Android. In this instance, the government would have the final say on who buys the operating system, which is a pretty big deal as well. Selling Android is a significantly big deal. Android itself is also another open source project that's backed by Google. It's not entirely Google owned. I say quote unquote because Android, as any of us who've used an Android phone knows it, and the open source equivalent is very different. There is a lot of proprietary stuff that Google has done, and over the years, Android has slowly become less and less open source as Google has enforced more and more proprietary code that isn't open source. So, a lot of if you ran like stock like from the open source code Android, it would probably look pretty unrecognizable from what you would get on like a Google Pixel phone or a Samsung phone. And even then, other OEMs like Samsung or OnePlus or LG or whatever brand of phone you have, they do typically tend to add other things on top of Android. So, Android nowadays is kind of like a very basic base plate that either Google stuff or other third-party stuff is placed on top of. But usually 9 times out of 10 there is a lot of Google stuff. The government is saying that they need to stop putting so much Google stuff and stop pressuring other companies to put Google stuff on Android phones because, well, Google provides a lot of different incentives for other companies to put a lot of Google stuff on Android phones. They push a lot of incentive to do it. And the DOJ is saying, no, 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 you can't do that anymore. And if you ignore us, we're just going to force you to sell Android to somebody else. Which, again, would be a pretty big deal because who would you sell Android to and what would it look like being sold to somebody? I mean, obviously it wouldn't be Apple. Apple has iOS. I mean, that would create a super big monopoly. So who would it go to? Would it go to like Microsoft? Would Microsoft get back in the phone market? I mean, they stopped making Windows Phone. Maybe they'd like take on Android. Like it's just an interesting thought. What would happen if Android was sold? Like that would be a pretty big deal. So clearly the DOJ is really putting the pressure down on Google, and I don't necessarily blame them. They are a pretty big monopoly. They own the biggest search engine, the biggest web browser, the biggest ad platform, and the biggest video sharing platform. In fact, the only video sharing platform that anybody really uses. Like what you're seeing me on right now is owned by Google, and it's the only one anybody ever uses. So no, they have a pretty big monopoly in a lot of different markets. So I can see why the DOJ is doing this. I am very curious to see where this is all going to go, when these remedies are actually going to go ahead and be, done and, put into effect. Because of, like, this case has been going on since 2023. It's not going to go on forever. It's got to end eventually. It's 2025 now. There has to be a stop somewhere, and whether that is with Google keeping their products but with some changes, or Google being incredibly split up into a variety of different companies, only time will tell. But we will see what happens. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Take care, you guys, and remember to stay safe out there.